Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. Now, for those of you who don't recall, the Nelson Mandela Foundation is trying to be weaponized. It's basically being weaponized against the Jewish state. And specifically, according to the latest news out of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, they were attempting to do a propaganda campaign against what they classed as Zionist Christians who had support for Israel. And with me is actually a member of the Zionist Christian Foundation, Bafana Modise. Hello, welcome to the show. Well, thank you for taking time to talk with me.
Good day, Byron. Thank you for having me, and good day to the viewers.
So, as you know, the current Nelson Mandela Foundation is currently attempting to do some propaganda to the Christian community in South Africa. What's your take on this?
It is sad to see the organization or the foundation of people like Mandela, a man of peace and reconciliation, a man who sought a two-state solution, supported or was friends to both Shimon Peres and Yasser Arafat. He himself recognized Zionism as a movement of the Jewish people to return to their homeland. And for this movement to turn around and demonize Zionism and even attack Christians. Let's first understand what is Christian Zionism. Christian Zionism is Christians who literally believe that the Bible happened in that land, that Moses led the Israelites from Egypt to that land, that Jerusalem is exactly where it is. So it's just biblically, it's just Christians who just are believing the Bible. They're
Mm.
trying to find catchy words into like separate it. If you're a Christian, you believe in the Bible, then you're a Zionist. What affirms this belief is prophecies that spoke of the remnants or the exiles. They will return after years of exile back to their homeland, which is inherently what Zionism is, returning from exile to Israel. And these Christians believe that when the Jews returned to this land, it was affirming biblical prophecy being fulfilled, that indeed what God had said, it has come to pass. So, what they are trying to do, they are trying to push Christians to end up saying, we believe in God, but we don't care about Israel. We support Palestine to exist, but in a way, again, they try to say there was never Israel. So therefore, Jesus was a Palestinian. Everything is Palestinian, and there was never in Jewish history, Jewish archaeology. To them, it never existed. Jews are just white people coming from Europe, which is something that the Christians in South Africa and across the world are literally saying, no, you are trying to rewrite history. What you find, Byron, it is that they have tried so many times to go for these Christians. It did not work. But now they're awarding 150,000 to those Christians who would be willing to deny their faith, deny biblical truth for to be incentivized. So you
Mm.
only put money on something if it's not necessarily working. So they're trying to buy off Christians basically with 150,000.
Mm. And it's interesting that it's not a 150,000 once off to the best propaganda against it. It's 150,000 per piece of propaganda that's basically accepted. So it's interesting that you say a lot of what you say. So the idea that Jesus was a Palestinian, I think, would probably offend Jesus, mainly because the area in question at the time was part of Judea. Obviously,
Yeah.
Judea being what they eventually referred to as Jews because they came from Judea, and their religion was that of, if you read the Old Testament, they don't talk about the Jews, they talk about, the God of Abraham, Isaac, Newt, and so forth. So you don't typically tend to see that. Now, when the temple was destroyed in 70 AD and the Jews were exiled in 136 AD, then what you typically tended to find is that the Romans renamed the area to Palestina, which was in reference to the Jews' historical enemies, that being the Philistines. So that was the
Yeah.
first time that the Romans renamed it after the exiles of the Jews. So the idea that Jesus, who died around what 30 AD or 33 AD, by some estimations that he would have been a Palestinian. No. Now, Palestine itself could never have actually been an independent territory because it's never been an independent territory. It's always been involved as part of larger kingdoms. The last kingdom that it was involved in or was part of was obviously the Ottoman Empire. And obviously, when the
Yeah.
Ottoman Empire collapsed, it reverted then to the British, and then obviously from the British they gave it over to become an independent state. Now, when it was under the British rule, it was called at the time, obviously, Palestine, but it was the British land of Palestine. It still wasn't an independent land, so per se, but the actual population was very small. Some estimations around 50,000 people maybe lived around the region. And obviously, when it was given to the Jews in 1948, there was massive Arab invasion into the land from what was now called Jordan, because many of them didn't want to see a Jewish homeland, because according to them, it was in direct contravention to the Quran. Because obviously the Quran says that, the end times won't happen until the Jews have been kicked out of the land, if you want, and they're no longer there. So the Quran, according to the Quran, they can't have their own end times, their own Messiah, if the Jews are there. And it also goes against their prophecies, which would kind of counterbalance or go against their religion. So that's one of the reasons that they invaded their territory. But ever since, as you'll know, the idea of Palestine was originally an invention of Yasser Arafat. Yasser Arafat being, one of the trained individuals that were trained by the Russians. So this has led some individuals to claim that the idea of Palestine was a communist or a Soviet invention in order to basically get the Arab nations united against the West. Is anything I'm saying wrong, or do you agree with what I'm saying?
When you spoke about Jordan, I think we go back as well to before Jordan was a country, it was literally Palestine as well. So out
It
of
was part
the
of it, yes.
region, yes, so the region, Palestine was a region, and out of that region, two countries were created, which
Mm,
was Jordan and Israel.
correct.
However, when the PLO was formed, it was formed in 1964, if I'm not mistaken. And during this time, the lands that the Palestinians today are claiming, where Gaza was in Egypt's hands, and the West Bank was in Jordanian hands.
Mm,
So therefore, what land were they wanting? What country were they demanding by creating a Palestinian state? They could have just said to Jordan and Egypt, give us these territories and let's create a Palestinian state. However, it shows that it was never necessarily about half of Israel. It's about the total destruction of Israel. The PLO was formed as a way of not to create a state, but to destroy a state.
mm,
And I think once people understand that part, they would probably understand the ideology of Hamas and all these other groups, your Iranian, your Houthis, your Hezbollah. To them, Israel existing, it's in their eyes an abomination. They see it as a settler colonial entity. They don't see it as the Jews have returned to their homeland. They see it as an American satellite state existing in the Middle East for American imperialist power, whatever they call themselves.
mm,
However, when you remember, Byron, around the 1930s or 20s, the Mufti of Jerusalem went to meet with Hitler. And I think this part of history usually it's just bypassed because at that time there was already an influx of Jews who were going to Israel making Aliyah before even 1948.
yeah,
And
but it's
he
important
feared
to
that
remember
this,
that the British actually stopped them from doing that just prior to 1939. So, because of
yes,
Arab concerns, the British actually prohibited them from making aliyah to Israel, which
yes.
directly ended up leading to the Holocaust and the murder of 6 million Jews. So, inevitably, Britain was complicit in that. In fact, they were the ones who directly stopped it from, because obviously many of those people's lives could have been saved if they had just made aliyah to Israel.
Yeah, I think as they always try to claim that the Jews have always been living peacefully with the Arabs, which historically we can't find any trace of that. In the 1940s, we saw Jews being kicked out of Arab lands. When Israel was created, the Jews went to war with the whole Arab armies.
Yeah.
We have seen
There, there,
this from the
there,
beginning.
there is
Yeah,
there is some evidence of it, and that's obviously in some of the rabbis. So as you'll know, one of the most famous rabbis that we have, even he was in the Arab lands when he created all of his stuff. That's Maimonides, and the Ramban, many of them were in Arab lands when they came through those things. But Maimonides himself was supposedly. Um, he was in what was obviously the Ottoman Empire at the time, and he was very high up in it. He was one of the advisors. But what you were about to say there, and sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but actually what you were about to say there is very important because upon the formation of Israel, a lot of those Arab countries were like, you've got your own land now, so you should footsack and go to that one, and they kicked them out and told them to go there. Interestingly, so
yeah.
did Europe after World War II. A lot of them
Mhm.
were like, you got your own land now, don't come to Germany, don't come to Poland, go there. So many of these Jews were exiled to Israel. That's where they were exiled to. And all you got to do is look at the population numbers in those Arab lands, and that's proven.
It shows you that, but I think what I was referring to was the Hebron massacre as well that took place in the land. So
Mm,
if they claim that before Israel was created, there was peace and love, then what about the Hebron massacres? What about all the bloodshed that even took place before that?
mm,
The uprisings that took place within the land between Jews and Arabs, the Mufti of Jerusalem to go and meet Hitler uh, back in those years also begs the question: why was he going to meet a number one enemy of the Jews? What was the plan? But then moving along, when you listen to Nelson Mandela when he spoke, he said, "We insist on the right of Israel to exist within secure borders." And he even said the ANC recognizes Zionism as a Jewish nationalism. However, as of recent, the same ANC has turned around and now they are calling Zionism racism. They've turned around and they're even equating Jews to settler colonialists. But this only happened around the early 2000 after the UN conference that took place in South Africa. When Mandela was in power, when Mbeki was in power, the relations between Israel and South Africa were very quite amicable. Yes, there were debates on whatever issues are happening in Israel, but it was not this hostile, anti-Jew, anti-Israel that we are seeing today. It's appalling that South Africa has become this country now, the only African state that is pursuing this battle, ignoring issues in South Africa, in Africa, in Sudan, in Congo, even within our borders, in just around the corner in Mozambique. But they are literally becoming the mouthpiece of the Arab world, or not say the uproar of this battle. And at the what at the detriment of South Africans. Right now, we are where we are as a nation because we're playing in a war that has nothing to do with us. Yes, we do have a role to play, and that role must be the role of Nelson Mandela to bring peace, reconciliation. Mandela went to Israel. He got his honorary degree from Ben Gurion University. The man was not a staunch enemy of Israel, and today he has been purported to have become an enemy of Israel. Even the Nelson Mandela Foundation today is also abusing his name to push this agenda, and we have someone called Mandla Mandela as well abusing his grandfather's legacy as a way to position him as an arch enemy of Israel. Meanwhile,
mm,
Mandela was a Zionist because he believed in the right of Israel to exist, just like most of us.
mm, mm. It's an interesting take. I mean, in terms of Mandela's grandson there, he's obviously converted to Islam. The purports are that he converted there because I think he married a girl or he got involved with a girl that was Islamic. Um, but he's had some very staunch anti-Israel positions that he's taken. What's your view of that?
I look at him, he does not have any political career in South Africa. He has never been relevant in the local politics. And I think he has found something that makes him relevant and outspoken. And the Mandela name is working for him, even though he's abusing it. We are at the point where today, even people like Naledi Pandor, she's literally pushing this agenda through the Nelson Mandela Foundation. So I think it's all about creating an image that Mandela and his grandson, they are in support and they hate Israel. But that's not the truth.
Mm.
He's doing it because he's an Islamist, or he's a Muslim, and then he has his own radical ideological views. The same way with Naledi Pandor, she's a Muslim, and there's a conflict of interest here. Can we really trust you to be objective as a leader in South Africa on this issue, understanding that also you yourself have an interest as a Muslim? But that question is never asked. Should we be worried that you called Hamas and yet you are a minister of this country? Should we be worried about your close ties with Iran? And all of those things, they need to come into play. And that's why this issue of the ICJ case and this Hamas coming to South Africa, it just draws the line that this is no more than just a political ploy that is not necessarily about Palestinians, but against Israel. Palestinians deserves better. I believe that Hamas must surrender and be demilitarized. Gaza must go into the hands of moderate people who can literally seek peace with Israel and live side by side. It's been 77 years. But to you, for a minister to call a terrorist organization that is totally opposed to the creation of Israel, that is totally opposed to Jews, it begs the question, why is she part and parcel of this? And now she was appointed as a chairperson of Nelson Mandela Foundation. And when she gets on that duty, what does she do? Again, one conflict in the whole world, Palestine. She was a minister of DECO. To this day, DECO has an event every single month on Palestine. It should worry South Africans. Why are we not having events that are focusing on our issues in Africa? Why is DECO not pro-South Africa anymore, but playing global politics at the cost of South Africans? It doesn't make
Mm.
sense.
So the current reports are that as Dango's currently, because obviously, as you know, Pandor's not involved in Dirk anymore, but Pandor is still there. Um, so or Dugmore's still there. So what do you think of the Director General?
We first she said something while outside the ICJ when he said that he does not view Hamas as a terrorist organization. The same Hamas that raped and killed women, the same Hamas that has been encouraging suicide bombing in the name of Allah, the same Hamas today that has kept the people of Gaza in starvation, in war. He does not see them as terrorist organization. So clearly he sees them as an ally. And the
Mm.
question then becomes, are we really as a nation, as South Africans, do we really support this? Or is our name as South Africa under his leadership pushing other agendas than the agenda of the country?
Mm. Mm. The question is, how would you get rid of him? So, for those of you who don't know, I think he was appointed by Jesse Duarte, and he was the brother of Jesse Duarte, the troll of the ANC. And from current estimations, I think he's still got 3 years left on his contract as DG of the of Durko. But more interestingly enough, we've also started to see like Ronald Lamola. He's not a Muslim, but his approach seems to be he seems to be very much towing the line of Durko's policy. What's your view on that?
I think Ronald has the toughest job. He's trying to fix what the previous administration messed up. He's trying to keep America happy while at the same time look strong to other partners in the global scheme of things. So he's balancing him being pro-South Africa and trying to mend relations with America. Mid at the same time, he's trying to posture as this strong man who is not scared of America, and that usually doesn't really work. I think the issue here is the party line. The party has resolved, and they've already taken a decision. And where that decision is right now, it's definitely backfiring on us. The question is, will he have the guts with Cyril to literally withdraw the ICJ case, adopt a more moderate stance on this issue, call for whatever a two-state solution or for de-escalation of, but anything except, excuse me there, because I think right now South Africa, Donald Trump is literally saying to South Africa, choose your friends. It's either you are with me or against me. And I think that's where they are in a corner and Ronald is trying to toe the line.
But it seems like the South African government appears to be very happy to say that they're against the US. They're like, we don't need you. And we've seen that from a lot of the noise that's come out there, specifically around the current tariffs. But I think there's some interesting things that you've mentioned. So the first is obviously around the RCJ case. So I think the ANC has said quite a lot now at the moment that they don't feel the need to withdraw the case because they feel that the call or the, should we say, the noise against Israel's become quite, according to them, quite prolific now. There's obviously they've been joined in the case by, I think they've been joined with by Spain, Ireland, and Brazil, if I'm not mistaken. I think they've all said that they wanted to join the case against Israel, specifically in terms of genocide, even though actual genocide is occurring right now in Sudan and also in the south of Syria with the Druze community. But it appears that those communities don't matter as much as the 40 kilometers of Gaza. So
Certainly,
that's curious.
certainly, Baron. Palestine is the only issue. Sorry about that. Palestine is the only issue that has funders and it has money and people are just abusing it for whatever.
Mm,
The issue of Sudan has been happening for so many years. Al-Bashir was in South Africa, and this government escorted him out. This is the man who is killing black people in Sudan. So for them to posture as heroes of human rights or they are champions of human rights, but yet ignoring next door issues, I don't think it's very credible. I don't think it works in their favor.
mm,
Zimbabwe has been under sanctions for so many years. We look at the continent itself, look at Morocco. Just now, Zuma went to Morocco, where people of sub-Saharan Western Africa are in trouble as well. So the genocide case was cooked up, truly speaking. I think it was cooked up as a way to apply pressure. For what reason, we don't even know to this day. Why is South Africa involved in this? But yet, Egypt is very far removed from it. The Arab world is very far removed from this issue. It's only us and the Western nations. But where are the Arab countries to literally support this? Why did the Arab League just a week ago announce collectively that Hamas must surrender and be demilitarized? But yet we on the outside, out of the region, we are condemning Israel. Couldn't it be that we don't really understand the region as to to think we do? But the two things, the Arab world understands that Hamas and Iran are the issue here, but the
mm,
world seems to want to focus only on the Jews being the issue.
mm.
Egypt is just next door. Why did Egypt close its borders in 2005 and to this day they've not opened their borders?
Well, they've not taken
Why
one. They've not
where
taken any Gazan refugees at all. And that they do share two
my point
borders. I mean, there's
exactly?
a lot of people forget about that. But the Egyptian border is actually a
Yeah,
bigger border than the border with Israel. It's more fortified and more secure than Israel's border. So,
even the wall is way bigger than what they call the wall in Israel. So
mm,
the question then becomes, this is the only war where people are not allowed to run away from a war zone because Egypt has closed their borders and even Palestinians are paying a hell of a lot of money to leave Gaza. And why is that Hamas are the only liberation movement that is led by billionaires? Why is it that Hamas is the only liberation movement that has billions that are living in Qatar,
mm,
why is no one asking questions of what happened to billions of dollars from the Western nations? So that's why
mm,
I'm saying that the Arab world knows the truth, and that's why you don't see marches in their countries. You don't
mm,
see a lot of this crazy thing that we see in the world. And I'm not even saying we should ignore Palestinian plight. No, it should be addressed. But it will not be addressed as long as we continue rewarding Hamas for its actions, as long as we continue giving Hamas some sort of a validation by calling them a liberation movement. Freedom fighters don't rape, freedom fighters don't have hostages, freedom fighters are not billionaires, freedom fighters are not encouraging suicide bombing. Freedom fighters fight for a cause. And the
Mm.
cause must be the one where people live together, not the one of exterminating the other. That's not freedom fighting. That's genocide. And sadly, today, Israel has been called a genocidal entity for defending itself. And sadly, the Palestinian people, they are not being allowed to leave the war zone. Egypt can just open the gate and let the people go into Egypt and let the war finish. Hamas must just, if they really care about Palestinians, the world must pressurize Hamas as the Arab League did. Surrender, release hostages, this thing is over. I don't know what is so tough about this.
Mm. I mean, this is obviously the big question that many people are now raising, right? So it's like there's a lot of criticism against Israel for trying to get their hostages back, but um, there are still hostages in Gaza, and if Hamas really wanted to cease the operation in Gaza tomorrow, they would release the hostages. I think the estimations are that there's still 50 hostages, but I think only 20 of
Yes.
them, it's estimated that they're still alive. The rest they think
Mhm.
are dead. And they recently issued a video of making one of the starving hostages dig his own grave. But more interestingly enough, the idea that somehow, Hamas is this liberation movement. Well, Hamas only came into power after Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005. And after a bloody war between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, did Hamas win? So Hamas isn't actually that old a creation. It's kind of relatively new in terms of liberation movements. It's not like the ANC that's like, oh, we've been struggling for liberation since, the Land Act of whatever, or, since apartheid started in 1940, whatever. But it's not like that, because as you know, they weren't there for a very long time. The actual
Yeah.
creation of the idea of the Palestinian state only really happened after the Arabs tried to invade Israel in the original war, and they lost because Israel won.
Yes.
And then after that, they were
True.
like, okay, well, we can't win from a militaristic point of view, so they created this idea of the Palestinian state and the poor plight of the people. The idea that they were a conquered people, and they did that with the help of the Russians. So
Mm.
Arafat was trained in Russia. The idea of the Palestinian state was created in Russia. And a lot of the ANC leaders were in Russia learning to be ANC leaders. So it would appear
Yeah.
that what we're really seeing is the vestiges, the end goals of the Soviet Union. Even though the Soviet Union's no longer around, the dirty work that the Soviets created is still very much there.
I mean, one understanding my history and actually being a former member of the movement of the African National Congress, we learned about all our relations and how our leaders were trained in Russia, some were trained in Ukraine, and how we met with Arafat as people who were oppressed and all of that. And I think for most cadres, they believe that. Secondly, others, they hate Israel based on that the arms sales between the apartheid regime and Israel also kind of fueled the fire.
Mm.
However, when you go to Israel, according to that propaganda, you are just white people, you're not Jews, right? So that's when we got to Israel and I got to see it, I was like, but gents, but these are the Jews. If I'm an African and we want to liberate Africa as we say, isn't Israel a decolonization project that is successful, that the indigenous people have reclaimed back their land and built and defended their lands? Isn't that what the ANC was formed to do, to reclaim our lands and establish and build our nations? Why are we fighting against the people who were previously disadvantaged, which are the Jews? the people who were also discriminated against, which are the Jews. The Jews have always been part and parcel of our struggle. They funded some of you comrades. They fought side by side with you. Why are we today the enemies of these comrades? When we talk about Martin Luther King, he was standing next to Jews when he was fighting for the freedom of the Black Americans. In South Africa, here, it's about Helen Suzman and many other Jewish leaders, men and women who fought the struggle, defending or trying to push this. So while today are we here? Are we supporting Palestinians, or are we supporting the idea that Israel must not exist? Because I think there is a two sides here. There's a Palestinian cause that must be dealt with, but there is another one where it's abused to push an agenda. People. That's why I believe countries like your UAE, your Saudi Arabia, your Egypt, or whatever, they understand the cracks of the issues. And that's why they are not necessarily pursued by any of these things, because they know that there's a Palestinian issue that the whole world supports, but there is one of Hamas, of Iran, of Hezbollah, of Soviet Union that is basically anti-West and is built on destroying a country rather than building a country. If Arafat could afford Jordanians and Egyptians for West Bank and Gaza, then I would say this is a liberation movement. But they never fought the Jordanians for their lands. They were happy to be annexed by Jordanians. They were happy to be annexed by Egypt. It was only after the War of 67, when the Arab world lost their second war, that all of a sudden that this issue was left to the people of Palestine to fend for themselves. And sadly, what we are seeing today is that it might not be resolved because the people who are claiming to be champions of it don't have the interest of Palestinians at heart. Why do you still have hostages and you have lost over thousands of people already? What is it for? It doesn't make sense that I would claim to defend South Africans, and Lesotho kills over 10,000 of them, and I'm still holding Lesotho's hostages. Do I really care about Lesotho, or do I really care about keeping the idea alive? For what end? It doesn't matter.
But it's important to also understand that a two-state solution could have been had many, 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 many times. But the reason that it hasn't been done, even though many individuals have attempted to negotiate a two-state solution, is because, let us not forget, one of the key contentions is Jerusalem.
Yeah.
They want Jerusalem as their capital, but the Jews are like, we can't give you Jerusalem. It's like, and it's their land. So, you know, they are effectively trying to annex land from the Israelis. So, you know, it isn't about Gaza. It isn't about the West Bank, even though the West Bank is, you know, there's a good number of the West Bank that actually has Jewish control, as in it's got, you know, Jews living in them. And they say, well, that's where your settlers come in, right? They're saying that all those people that went into foreign territory, the West Bank, and they settled there, they're like, well, those are the settlers. And as you know, they use the exact same arguments in Gaza, which is why there was forced removals of Jews from the Gaza when they left in 2005. So, you know, that no one talks about the forced removal of the Jewish people who had homes there, you know, buildings there, and they were removed out and taken into Israel. So people lost their homes.
I
So
think the most recent one was the Ehud Barak 2008, where he even went as far as, you know what, we'll give you East Jerusalem as your capital. Let's have this peace once and for all. And they still said, no. It is true. Excuse me, there's a call trying to come in. It is true that Jerusalem is the hot pot, is a hot issue here. And I think even for Christians in this country, I know we know the truth. That Trump, for him to go and declare that it is the eternal capital of Israel, most Christians clapped their hands and said, it's better to accept history as it is and reality and work on it than to deny it. And I think the problem that we are having today is that we are debating with people who have invented their own history, accounts of history, and they want the world to believe it. What you are seeing today, and I've said it before, if we could have Palestinian leaders If they could have just said yes to 2008 Ehud Barak's peace deal, maybe there would be peace today.
I doubt it.
Gaza, I doubt as well, but maybe.
Land for peace has never worked in that territory, as you know.
But you see, the issue for Israel is this: you are fighting the war of existence. And on the other side, others are fighting for a religious fundamentalist ideology. So you have Israelis who really want to have peace, and you can see them today in the streets. They've been marching against Netanyahu. They want this thing all over and done with, right? And this is Israel's culture. Democracy lives side by side. You have the Arabs living in Israel. You have Arabs voting in parliament. You know, there are those 20% Arabs minority in Israel have equal rights, which is something that Jews don't have in other Arab states. So for you, you are fighting for the right to exist and to have a thriving democracy. On the other side, for them, it's more about religion and religious fundamentalism. And that's why you saw when Hamas launched October 7th, they did not say liberation for Palestine. They said Al-Aqsa Mosque. They literally pointed at Jerusalem. For them, this was a war for Jerusalem, not for rights, not for human rights, not for the people of Gaza, not for the children of Gaza, and they are the government of Gaza. So that's why I'm saying the war becomes tougher because you want to argue based on Western or biblical values of let's live together, blah blah blah, and the other is more like it's my land, you must get out or you must pay jizya to some extent. But these are religious fundamentalists or they are radicals, which I think fairly we also have some within the Israeli community, like your Modise and whatever, and all those guys. However, Israel is built on a democratic principle and Judeo-Christian values. And that's why you are fighting to exist next to them. They are fighting to replace you. And that's why I feel like this war will continue on end because it's hard to convince someone who's pursued by religion that anything can be negotiated. It's easy to speak to Israelis because to them it's all about we want to exist and to build a thriving economy and build a Jewish state. So I think that's where the problem becomes. But when you have people like Naledi Pando, you have all these groups that are happening in Europe in the name of Palestine. It's not about Palestine. I don't believe it's about the people of Palestine. It's more about demonizing America, demonizing the Jews, and literally pushing this agenda of Iran and the Brotherhood and all these other groups which are radical Islamists. It's the same as Boko Haram in Nigeria, the same as Al-Shabaab in Mozambique. These people have one agenda to literally take over, dominate, and not to live side by side.
Well, I'm going to say we've only got like a minute 30 left. So I'm going to say thank you for joining me. It is a concern because South Africa is predominantly a Christian country. It's not a Muslim country. I think the Muslim population here is like less than 1%, but it does look like to a large degree, the Muslims have taken over our foreign policy. But it is what it is, and I really do thank you for taking the time to talk with me. You got 1 minute left if you want to summarize your position.
I think it's important as Christians that we stand up for what we believe in. Our support for Israel is not necessarily hatred for Palestinians. We don't hate Palestinians. We hate that their plight has been abused to push agendas that have nothing to do with them. We still call for peace. We call for de-escalation of war. And we hope that both sides one day will live side by side in peace. But as Christians, Israel belongs to God, and God gave it to the Jews. And we have nothing more to say or to deny, but to support that both people should live side by side. But we must never deny by biblical truth or try to be politically correct when it comes to what we know to be true, which is it is God who has restored Zion in our lifetime. Thank you. God bless.
Thanks so much for joining me. Until next time, man. Take it easy.
Stop, Chuck.
Thanks.